So this is your second CES week.
Yes.
And second Brand Innovators week here. And what, as a pharma company, I know you have human health, you have animal health as well. What are you most looking forward to getting out of this week?
Well, I would like to get some actually practical applications for AI because everybody's talking about AI and it's such a, word that our leadership and management is asking for. But what I'm truly looking for is the application for media and a pharma company that we can practically apply it versus just talk about it. In our operations, marketing operations, and media campaigns. So that's my sort of quest for this year's CES.
Going to dig a little further on that because we work in highly regulated environment. Some of the practical use cases we start to see pop up around AI have to do with generative AI and creative development, and better than anybody, we have to go through med legal review, so iterations of creative tend to be problematic. Where are you hoping the practical application leads for your business?
Well, so I would really love to cut down on MLR reviews, which for people that are not in pharma are the medical, legal, regulatory reviews, because I envy people from the CPG spaces. You guys could actually do cool stuff. Anytime I actually go to my, MLR and I propose the cool stuff, most of the time I get shut down. Or it takes like 5 or 6 or 8 months to get something approved. So my hope would be that I can actually automate some of the, the legal, medical reviews, some of the repetitive content. And actually, there has been some AI applications that show that AI can actually review legal documents much better than a human can. So I really would love for that AI to review that part so that maybe I can actually start thinking more about the creative things and start brainstorming with those buddies in my in the pharma company, with my company. It's very traditional to actually be more creative, be more, just more relevant towards the audiences in the creative applications.
If you can answer this, how close do you think your legal policy teams would be to accepting that there is a version of AI that could help them in that environment versus a purely manual review?
Well, I think it's going to be a long way. I'm not going to be too optimistic there. But I think that if we start, it's sort of like the old saying, you don't eat the animal all at once. You need to, eat it in chunks, right? I think that if you take parts of that process, and if you can make our teams, especially legal teams, comfortable that that process can be very well reviewed by AI, which saves them time, then I think that, this can be the first step. And if we go through this step, then we can, find another step that we can make them comfortable with. And I think that that's the way that the journey for those teams to get comfortable with AI actually picking up some parts of what right now is a very heavy human time with a very well-paid humans, actually, right? So I think that that's the way for the future, I hope.
All right. Keeping on the theme for regulatory for one more question, and then we can get into other topics.
So interesting,
it's so
right?
well, it is to you and I, unfortunately.
Yes.
Probably next year, or this year, actually now, with the new administration coming in, the most unpredictable environment, both politically, where there'll be a changing of guard of the FTC, as well as just viewpoints on direct-to-consumer pharma advertising in general. How do you prepare a year in media for your teams with so much uncertainty, with potential outcomes that could vary from nothing changing to everything changing?
It's a very good question. So actually preparation is something that we have to do right now because we don't have a crystal ball and there's just so unknown for big pharma, especially with the new administration coming, but it's also with new privacy laws that are coming. So the best way for us to actually prepare is, it's not a secret, that a lot of pharma companies are still heavily reliant on linear TV. Because if you switch on the TV, if maybe none of you really do switch on the real TV sets with the linear TV, this is like a fight of all the pharma companies for share of voice. But what I am predicting and what I want to prepare my company for is to actually be less reliant on linear TV, because it is, there's higher commitments that you need to make in a traditional way. And then once you commit yourself to, with less of the ability to get out of those commitments, and if there is something unpredictable that will happen to us, or predictable that we could have avoided would happen to us, and it would be very difficult to get out of those commitments. It's something I don't want my company to be facing, and my media budgets, investments, campaigns to be dealing with. And I don't want to be dealing with this next year, so I really am trying to prepare our company for more flexibility, more agility, more geo-targeting, that we can really action upon without penalties, and it can be, really, we can be more prepared for what's ahead of us in order to actually connect our media investment better to the financial results and profits.
We'll come back to that one in a few questions, but thinking about pharma in general and trying to make this more broadly applicable to other categories, we've seen an influx in different pharma companies start to hire from outside the space for this very reason, is that there's a belief that pharma cannot be as innovative and there's too many restrictions, but I know you don't agree with that. And how are you applying things that you know from outside of pharma media to practices that can help Boehringer achieve success?
Yes, a good question. So actually, I also came from the CPG space. That's how I started I started my career on the media agency side, and then I moved to a CPG company, and I spent many years working for a CPG company. So call me biased, maybe I am. But then I moved to the pharma space, and this is my second pharma company. But I always saw these opportunities for pharma advertisers that actually have really hefty budgets compared to the CPG companies to be more innovative in that space. And I'm trying to actually apply a lot of things that I've learned through my years at CPGs to the pharma advertisement. Of course, within the regulatory and privacy, and this is all the hoops and all the obstacles we need to jump through, which I'm sometimes looking backwards, I'm sort of envious of the old times, but also, every challenge is an opportunity, right? So I'm trying to implement a lot of those more creative marketing strategies in the pharma advertising. One thing that I'm very passionate about is actually connect our advertising campaign to culturally or very mass cultural moments to actually still attract the live audiences that are there. They tune in to to those moments on TV. They follow this throughout a lot of different platforms. So those moments are important for me for my campaigns.
And that's a good point, because I think what is shifting, and it's we all get this. What is shifting is the way that consumers consume media, right? And if you're watching live sports, if you're watching live awards shows, if you're watching any type of live event, what is playing out is not just happening on your TV. You're researching players. If it's sports, you're researching award winners, nominees on your phone. You might be texting back and forth with friends. So these award shows, these tent poles, these sporting events no longer happen in one place. They happen in multiple places. And so that requires a shift in behavior and planning for how we think about what used to be silos. And each media channel plays a different role. So I'm going to ask you to go a little bit further on that point of how you start addressing the change in consumer habits to be able to support a tentpole campaign today versus what it was 5-10 years ago.
Right. So That's exactly our thinking is not just stay with one linear spot, because somebody might ask a question, right? Like, why would pharma company that actually sells a drug for type 2 diabetes or chronic kidney disease wants to be on the Oscars, or they want to be in the Golden Globes? But for us, it's more about actually creating what people call an omni-channel, which has a million definitions, but omni-channel, multi-channel campaign, right? So I might anchor it around the relevant placement on the Golden Globes, like my new spot for chronic kidney disease actually premiered in Golden Globes and a Rose Parade. But it was relevant because we also were doing unbranded campaign with taking over a float in the Rose Parade, and then we followed with the spot in the Rose Parade and the Golden Globes later on. But then also we amplify through the digital platforms. So it's not just one spot, because one spot does not produce a good ROI, especially when you're running 75s, which I have to for regulatory reasons. But when you start to actually build a multi-channel campaign utilizing platforms like CTV through the trade desk or online video, and you start to create a surround campaign around that tentpole event, then you're actually really getting an incremental reach and the relevance to your audience.
How do you ensure that goes smoothly across many different stakeholders, brand side, agency side, to convince them like this is the way forward? How are you setting up that for success?
Well, it's not easy, because I think that a role of a media center of excellence is actually, and myself as a leader for that team, is actually trying to be, I call it a translator. Very often I translate between the brand teams, what their KPIs of success are, to my media agency of record, to actually media partners, right? And sometimes it's a game of telephone, some things get broken, but at the end of the day, what I'm trying to actually go back to is what drives my business, and I'm trying to connect all the KPIs back to, have I driven script lift? Because that is my main KPI. For us, it's like, if the doctors, if the HCPs are writing more scripts for my medications, that is a success story for me. That's what makes my campaign more successful. But there's so many multi KPIs in that funnel to actually get to the script lift that I often play a role of a translator.
So we talked a little bit about changing behavior, old to new, and that also will impact measurement, because there is this world where you mentioned pharma has historically been heavy linear television. Even in the models that are still used, the mixed media models that are still used within some organizations, I'm not going to name any names, you still have linear show up well, despite the fact that it's higher frequency at this point, and we know the behavior is changing. It's not a myth that people are moving into streaming at all demographic and age levels now, but sometimes the mixed media model tells you to invest more there. How are you taking the conflicts of potential interest between measurement that maybe some of the people that you are representing on the brand side are compensated on, versus what you know to be true from a consumer standpoint and how they're consuming media, to make sure that you're placing investments in the right places?
Yeah. I mean, data is an amazing thing, but data is also, a confusing thing. And especially if you have multiple data sources, I mean, I'm positive that you guys can relate to me. They probably say a little bit different things. So then you look at 3 different data sources and you're like, okay, which one do I really follow? It's sometimes it becomes really confusing. So really the approach I take is I look at like, okay, what is the business result? And I am maybe an atypical media person, but I very often try to wear a CFO hat. Why? Because if you position media as the highest line item in your budget, those line items tend to be cut by CFOs, and I am positive that a lot of you can relate to this. They're like, whoa, what is this huge number sitting on this P&L? Can I cut it? And if it's not committed, right? But if you start changing this paradigm and you trying to position media as actually the growth driver, then the discussion becomes different. So I always look at all our media campaigns and I say, how can I justify that this investment drove that business result? And I'm trying to demystify media. And I found it very helpful in my entire career. I found a lot of media people in the past that actually built this like walls around their media position saying, Brent, don't really ask too many questions. Let me just give you an answer, because that served them well in the past, because that sort of gave them like the longevity of their position. I had completely different sort of approach, being like, yes, media is complicated, but at the end of the day, you can translate it and you can connect it to business results. And I found it very successful, because if you can actually, explain it this way to the CFOs and the CEOs, that your CMO really likes you. Because obviously that sort of like helps them with longevity of their positions, right? So I think that's very successful. Going back to the question, because I know I went a bit of a detour, but if you look at all those data sources, and the way I try to position is I triangulate the data sources. So for me, it's not just an MMM that would give you, that's not your North Star, and those MMM models, with all due respect to all the analytics teams, still, at least in my experience, are a bit outdated. They don't change very often, and they don't follow, how fast our industry is changing, actually. So they don't really follow the consumer and the media consumption trends. They favor linear TV. Sometimes, we have to fight for CTV or social media, or, because we know it works, actually. But then, the other data sources we bring in is, for us, it's like, say, measurement department like Crossix or IQVIA, that shows us the audience composition as well as the script lifts. And we also look at competitive share of voice, and we just, really look at the competitive landscape and media consumption. And, those old ways sometimes are really very useful. So I look at this as triangulation of data sources to actually provide the best, I think, advice to my brands.
That's probably my biggest takeaway is costs get cut from this conversation. I'm going to attribute that quote to you from here on out.
Thank you.
Yes, you got it. I got to dive a little bit deeper just on the performance side, because I think in digital and programmatic too, we get this stigma of like, it has to be precision. We have so much targeting capability at our disposal that we have to really narrow down the audience. And to a certain point, yes, because we don't want to target everybody in the US at all. But on the other side, you have to add context to performance. So if you're conveying like performance with some of the shorter term metrics that we might get from an Crossix or an IQVIA, you could show great outsized performance, but at the end of the day, if you're going back to your brand team, you're not really moving their percent share of script, right? So how are you balancing the nature of digital to be precise and targeted with the need to grow the business with a level of scale that rivals what used to happen on linear?
Yeah. Well, I am a big believer of incremental reach, and that's like media math 101 from a long time ago, and a lot of people that like grew up in digital world sometimes forget about this. But for me, I always try to look for new spaces. That's, where I can actually get that audience that I haven't reached yet. Because if I just continue with, the same sort of, media tactics, obviously I get into frequency through the roof, which sometimes when you grew up in a digital space, you tend to not notice that frequency is not a good thing. Right? Frequency is actually something that, we work with a trade desk on to try to actually get rid of the unhealthy frequency. I don't want to beat the dead horse to pulp anymore. I want to actually get to other places which, will give me more incremental reach. And that's more of this audience quality, right? And going to places where I can where I can see that my audience might be there, even though it may not be intuitively where you think my audience might be there, but that's, all the tools and all the measurement we do with the trade desk. But then I am a pharma brand, and I'm trying to be very more precise towards people that have the potential or are potentially diagnosed with type 2 diabetes or chronic kidney disease or heart failure. So basically, I try to balance it out. There is a place for, broader audience reaching elements, and then there is place to try to be very precision based and seeing if, I get down to very small audiences, is my ROI still there? And am I driving incremental script lifts? And I think it's a balancing act.
All right, one more question, and then we can open up the Q&A. Since we're future forward as our theme, if we're back here in 1 year, what are you saying about 2025 that drove success for you?
Well, if I implement this one AI application that would help my MLRR review, medical, legal, or regulatory reviews, I will be a very happy person, even if it's a very small incremental step. So I really am going to call it a very successful year. If from this CES, I'm going to bring a few innovation of this generative AI that would help me with the redundant tasks and move my creativity forward. So that to me is something that I really would love to accomplish if we're back here in a year and discussing, what this past year has created for us or given us.
Okay. Try to keep ourselves honest about it then.
Absolutely honest. And explore maybe more culturally relevant events for my pharma brands that will give me this, live audiences and incremental reach is also something that I am on a journey to do. We are going to doing the integration with the Oscars, and we're going to be amplifying for the Trade Desk and other online online platforms. So hopefully, if I'm going to do it successful, I'll be very happy.
Thank you guys.
Yeah, we can
Appreciate it.
just
Appreciate you
part
guys
for the
coming up.
day.
That was awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.